Well, we're really grateful that you've joined us and taken some time out to celebrate World Breastfeeding Week. So, for anybody who's joining in, Olivia is a lactation consultant, a midwife, and also a mum of two as well. So, a busy lady. So, we wanted to invite Olivia to come along, chat to us, and as a mum of two, you've obviously had a breastfeeding journey that you've gone through yourself, so you're very aware of the ups and downs that breastfeeding can bring. So we just want to really pick your brains and get any tips and tricks for anybody who's tuning in that is either expecting, wanting to breastfeed, or has got a newborn and they're maybe struggling a little bit, just to get some advice, really.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So can we please start, Olivia, with anybody who might be tuning in who is expecting and really would like to breastfeed, so they're trying to do lots of research and just prepare really for what might be ahead? Like, what advice do you give to pregnant women?
So we things like birth plans, they're really big. People love writing them. We do loads of research. But things like the postnatal period and how we're going to feed our baby, we tend to just think, oh, that'll just happen. And we don't really think about it. So my biggest piece of advice is actually put as much time and effort into your postnatal period and planning how you think you might get help if you need it. Where could you find it? Talking to your loved ones and people closest to you about whether breastfeeding means a lot to you, how you might want them to support you as well. So perhaps somebody saying, oh, just pump and I'll bottle feed the baby for you, may not be the best and easiest route for somebody who wants to breastfeed, whereas actually saying to them, I'd love it if you could come round and hold the baby for a contact nap for me, or if you could do some cleaning or bring some food for us. It's working out your postnatal landscape and making sure that before your baby arrives, you know where you can get help with infant feeding, whether it's going to be privately accessed or NHS. With the NHS, how can you access it? Do you have a self-referral system, or does a healthcare professional need to refer you? Is there charitable stuff like the Association of Breastfeeding Mothers or the Breastfeeding Network? Do they have any infant feeding cafes near you? And also trying to perhaps make yourself a virtual village as well, because lots of us may not know somebody who's breastfed, or even think it can be really simple, like, I don't feel like I look like someone that breastfeeds, and I don't know anybody that's done this. Is it wild for me to think that I can do it? Not at all. So making yourself a virtual village, looking on Facebook groups or following people on Instagram, and connecting with people in the comments or in a forum, sort of connecting in discussions, can really help you think, actually, there is no one type of person that breastfeeds. It's just one of those things that we can all do. So yeah, planning for your postnatal period is, I think, really important.
I think that's really interesting as well, because I know for myself, having gone through a pregnancy journey, you're all about the birth itself, and then you have a baby and you're like, oh, what happens
next? What the hell do I do now?
Yeah, and you think, I did want to breastfeed, so straight away I knew I wanted to do it, but I couldn't at first because I had a bit of a traumatic birth and he had to have formula at first, and that was fine because I needed to be fed. But then I felt like, oh, does that mean that I can't breastfeed? And like you said about the support through the NHS, like someone actually came to me and showed me like how to breastfeed, and I think I was really fortunate because I stayed in hospital, so I had that one-to-one time. But I guess if I'd have been sent straight home, that wouldn't have happened. So building this virtual village that you speak about and having those go-to resources straight away that you know where to go would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think also everywhere in the UK, it's very, very variable what's available on the NHS. Some places have amazing support, and others we really sell you. Breastfeed, it's best for your baby. Breastfeed, breastfeed, breastfeed. And then it's a bit like, yeah, great, you've had a baby, see you later. And there's no support, and people feel like they're failing because they haven't managed to do what they wanted to do with it, feeding their baby. And I think that's so unfair, and I talk a lot about the fact that people don't fail in breastfeeding. You are failed by society, by a healthcare system. There's very little consistent evidence-based support that's accessible via the NHS in the UK.
So I guess just skipping back a little bit, thinking about the preparation, I think I know I've had a lot of people speaking about colostrum harvesting and maybe trying to do that as more of a practical way of preparing. Like, what would your advice be on that?
So I love colostrum harvesting. So just to explain what that term means. So colostrum is that very first milk that the baby drinks, and it's available in the breast from about 16 weeks of pregnancy. So lots of people have no idea it's there. They don't leak or anything like that, but your body will have been preparing to feed your baby. And from 36 weeks in a low risk pregnancy with a singleton, so not twins or multiple babies, you could discuss with your midwife, your obstetrician, do they think colostrum harvesting would be a safe idea for you? And what you can do is hand express that colostrum and store it in a little oral syringe and put it in your freezer, so that if your milk is delayed in coming in at all, so it normally happens between day 2 and 4, that your milk comes in. So I always sort of think colostrum is a little bit like the concentrated squash, and your milk coming in is like adding the water. So suddenly the volumes are very big. We're quite happy for babies to have very little colostrum. It's very little, very frequently in those early days. It's also, some people consider it, because it's so rich in antibodies and immunological factors, we see the importance of the baby just having that, but we also need the volumes to increase around day 2 to 4. So sometimes if babies are very sleepy, or your milk is delayed coming in, they may need extra milk in that time. Or perhaps they may have their blood sugars monitored if the mum has diabetes or had certain medications. So rather than instantly reaching for formula, if you've harvested colostrum, you've got that skill immediately to be able to hand express more for your baby, and or you might have loads in your freezer that you can also give your baby. It's not to say that formula is a really bad thing. That's absolutely that's not true. For lots of babies, it can be life-saving. But what happens sometimes is we give formula, we give very large amounts that the baby wouldn't receive at the breast, which makes them sleep longer and go to the breast less. And it can start this really, really tricky cycle of giving these top-ups of formula. And that's where we find that people really struggle to establish their milk supply, because we've started that cycle of formula giving. So I always refer to colostrum harvesting as a little bit like an insurance policy. The likelihood is, if you've done it, you're not going to need it, but it gives you this confidence and empowerment to go, do you know what, my body's actually preparing for something that I had no idea whether I was going to do or want to do, and your body's getting ready to do it.
Amazing. So we actually just had somebody comment there, said, I'm struggling to actually harvest it. So what do I do in that meantime between the milk coming in and obviously baby being born? What would your advice be there?
So if you're struggling to harvest it in the pregnancy, I've got a video on my grid all about how to do it. You can always ask your midwife as well. If you get a community midwife, it might be a slightly unusual request, but they're very used to seeing breasts and showing somebody how to hand express. If it's once your baby has been born, your midwife will happily help you and have the time to help you how to do that. If you've struggled to hand express in the pregnancy, when you've had your baby, even if your baby goes straight to the breast and feeds well, you should quickly say to the midwife, can you just show me how to hand express? And if you're happy to, the midwife is very happy to wear gloves or wash her hands and actually show you the pressure and the direction on your boob. She can either put her fingers over your fingers if you don't want her touching you, or she could show you the pressure and the direction, and you sort of go, oh, we shouldn't be moving our fingers. Our fingers stay the same place on the breast, and it's the direction and the pressure that changes.
So even if you don't go into hospital with that harvested, you should be able to do it as there when you're in hospital or when you get home. And then somebody asked about defrosting it. Well, how do you do that? Because
they're in 1 ml syringes, they're very long, thin tubes. You put them in your hand, your armpit, put them in a pocket, and it defrosts within sort of 15 minutes. You can always run it under a warm tap, and it will defrost really, really quickly.
Fab. So I guess moving on to once you've had baby, and you might be straight away you're on with breastfeeding, but then you might struggle to get that milk flow. How would you encourage to really get as much milk as possible within that first week?
So we sort of say within the first 2 weeks, we have this golden window to turn on as many milk-making cells in our breasts as possible. And in fact, that stretches to 6 weeks, but those first 2 weeks are really, really important. So your baby going to the breast really frequently. We want at least 8 breastfeeds in 24 hours that's generally for the first 6 months of their life, but really frequently, and a really effective latch. So when I talk about latch, I mean the way in which the baby's mouth and body is positioned to your body, and the way in which their mouth goes to the breast. So it's not just sitting on a nipple, it's actually breastfeeding. It's a big, wide mouth. So your midwife should be able to help you get the latch and your positioning really, really good. If we have a deep latch, which your baby's mouth is asymmetrical at the breast, so their bottom lip is much lower on the breast, their head is tilted back, so they sort of go into the breast, this is the nipple, and their mouth sort of like that, their head tilted back. That means for the effort that your baby puts into going to the breast, they get the maximum reward. If we are emptying the breast, we are requesting to the body to make more. So the way our body makes more milk is by removing more. So if you're having problems with a very sleepy baby, or a baby perhaps that has a tongue tie and isn't really efficient at the breast, then hopefully your midwife will be supporting you and going, actually, we need to stimulate the breast more. We need to empty the breast more, whether that's by doing techniques like pumping or switch feeding, where we put the baby to sort of 1 breast, 2 breasts, 3 breasts, 4 breasts, so not staying at 1 breast until it's empty, but switching over lots and frequently, or hand expressing after feeds. There's lots of techniques that we can do, but you really need somebody skilled to help you with looking at your whole picture and your baby to say, I think this might be our root problem. Let's try this for a little bit and see if it addresses it.
And what about, is there anything you can do nutritionally that you can try, like some key foods or anything that would really help that as well?
So there's lots of anecdotal stuff and cultural stuff, like certain foods that people may want to eat to help with their milk supply. Nothing is going to beat an effective latch and frequently removing milk from the breast. If you enjoy the food, say if you love porridge, absolutely eat porridge, but you're not... Eating loads of porridge is not going to compensate for a bigger problem, which is probably your baby perhaps isn't efficient at the breast for some reason, or there might be other things going on with you. So if you enjoy the foods, absolutely eat them, but they're not going to compensate for efficient breastfeeding.
Okay. And obviously you speak about getting that effective, comfortable latch. Like once you've established that, should it then not be uncomfortable for the mum?
It's a really good question, because pain is one of the leading causes that people stop breastfeeding before they want to. So I don't think it's realistic to say breastfeeding is not going to be uncomfortable, or that, you know, if you feel any pain, you're doing it wrong. I just don't agree with it, because I think our nipples are very sensitive, delicate areas that haven't really had any exposure to life. So what's going to be happening when your baby goes to the breast? Your nipple is going to travel across the hard palate, so the bony roof of their mouth, to this soft sweet spot right at the back where your soft palate is. So it's very close to a gag reflex area if you want to feel it on yourself. So as your nipple for the very first time is being stretched 2 or 3 times in its length across a bony palate, I would expect there to be a toe curling, that's uncomfortable. But within 30, 40 seconds, it should be like, oh, that pain has totally gone. There's no pain, there's no pinching, and just a really strong sensation of suction. Some people find that really strong suction quite intense. I personally found it really intense. So it wasn't uncomfortable, it wasn't painful, but it was an intense sensation. So I think it's really tuning into yourself and what you're feeling to say, actually, is there a problem? And when your baby comes off the breast, it's looking at your nipple. Is your nipple exactly the same shape as it was before, but longer? Or is it now like a wedge or a new lipstick shape? Or does it have a crease along it? That would all be a sign that perhaps you've got a shallow latch and that the nipple is being squeezed and compressed against the bony roof of their mouth. So help with a deep latch then.
I totally get what you're saying. I remember when I first started doing it, I thought that I was breastfeeding, and then midwife was watching, like, no, that's not happening. Like, and then when you described the deep latch, like, I totally got it then. I was like, oh, this is like something I've never felt before.
Yeah. It's just like this, I don't know, it's like they're sucking from inside you. It feels really intense and very, very strong and deep. It's not, that can sound quite daunting to people, but it's not that icky feeling some people get when they touch their own nipple. It's very different to that. So don't be put off by that sort of, if you don't like your nipple being touched or anything, it's totally different.
And for any of the mild discomfort that you just obviously described, what would you suggest to help with that?
So if you've got discomfort, you're not alone. A lot of people get cracks and trauma on their nipple. That's very, very common. It's a sign that we need some help with the positioning and attachment, and usually it's like millimeter tweaks on something, just the way you're holding them or something like that. So the first step is get some skilled help. Get somebody who knows what they're doing to double check your latch and your positioning. Have a look on Instagram. There's loads of accounts that show real life videos of what a deep latch should look like and how to get that. I've got a latch highlight with real life babies, which can be really helpful for people. You can buy things like creams and stuff. I'd be very cautious of a very greasy cream. Most people buy a lanolin cream, but actually lanolin, lots of people are allergic to it and it makes their nipple pain worse. And it's incredibly slippy. So even a tiny bit of it will mean you put your baby on with a nice deep latch, but because it's so slippy, they can really quickly slip down to a shallow latch because of this cream. So if you can, try and find one lanolin free, or actually what's seen as one of the most effective ways to help with painful nipples is hand express a little bit of milk onto your nipple and let it air dry, is really great. Or there are some nipple compresses. They're like a sort of moist bandage sort of thing that you can just buy off Amazon or anywhere. So yeah, a nipple compress I think can be really helpful, or a lanolin free cream. But the most important thing is get some help and try and resolve what's causing that pain.
Yeah. So when you've resolved the latch and you feel really comfortable with all of that, how about then feeling comfortable with how much milk baby is actually taking? I know the word routine gets thrown around, and I don't know about anybody else, but I definitely didn't have a routine when it came to feeding my baby. And I was really worried about him having enough. So what would your advice be on that?
So in the UK, we don't normally weigh babies until day 5, and it usually between day 5 and 8, and it coincides with their heel prick test. So of course, weight gain is going to be our most important thing. We're expecting them to lose weight initially. We don't want them to lose more than 10%. But then we should regularly see our midwife or a health visitor have our baby weighed, and they'll put in the back of the Red Book or a Red Book app these centiles, and they should sort of be plotting your baby's growth against those. So weight is a really good indicator. But in those early days, there's a UNICEF breastfeeding mothers checklist available online. And what that will give you is for each day, however old they are, how many wees and poos to expect from your baby. And that is really, really important. So in those early days when your brain is absolutely fried and you basically don't know your arse from your elbow, writing down how many feeds in 24 hours your baby's having and how many wees, how many poos, and really importantly, what colour is that poo? Because we're going from that black tar-like meconium to a very liquid, can be explosive yellow poo. So we really want to be at that liquidy yellow poo by about day 5 or day 6. So pre-weight, we're looking at wees and poos, and then it's wees and poos with expected weight gain or tracking of centiles as well afterwards. And that's your health visitor after you've been discharged from the midwife, and before that it will be your midwife. So up to about day 10 to 14, most people are with their midwife first.
Fantastic. So in terms of moving on to not just routine, but
I could talk about routine because that's actually really important. We're in society, we really stress in society. We seem to think of routine as really important. Where strict routines and scheduled feeds are actually really detrimental to breastfeeding. Our babies, if you always think of us and our babies as cave people, would a cave woman had somewhere to put her baby? No, she would have held her baby constantly. Would she have had a clock? No, she would have looked at her baby and said, oh, I don't know what's wrong with you, or you look hungry, I'll whack you on my boob. And hopefully that will solve the problem. And that's what we should be doing to responsibly breastfeed. If we start stretching out feed, so making our baby wait longer, it can cause so many issues with weight gain, milk supply, contentment of your baby, really stressful for you. So one of the things people tend to say is, I've got to wait X number of times for my breast to refill. And it's not true. We've always got at least a third of our milk supply always remains in the breast. And it's a little bit like the ice machine on a fridge. If you take ice out, more ice is made. And it's exactly the same with the breast. If you take milk out, the baby feeds, more will be made immediately. We also know that breasts that are emptied frequently produce higher fat milk. So that sort of reflects why babies may cluster feed. Cluster feeding is when they feed really, really frequently, all in a few hours space of time. And that's usually because they are growing and they want fattier milk and they know what they need. So really trust that if your baby is growing well and your milk supply is good, trust them that they know what they need. If your baby is cluster feeding 24/7, then absolutely get help. But cluster feeding once or twice a day for most babies is totally normal. But if you're worried, check in with like your health visitor or your midwife.
Okay, so responsive feeding is the way forward, probably what, for the first few months at least?
Yeah, the first few months. I mean, some people then like routine and scheduling, but I would always encourage you to look at your day as a whole. So you have your morning cup of coffee at the same time. Look at what you're doing as a way to feel a sense of control. I know a lot of us modern women are like, I need to know what's happening and I want to control it. And babies are very, very hard to control. And it can make us lose our brains a bit. So it can be hard not controlling our babies, but trying to look at a rhythm. So a daily rhythm that you and your baby do. You get up around the same time, you have your breakfast and a cup of coffee, you let the baby feed, then you may have a shower. Just look at structure yourself rather than your baby is usually a better way of going about it.
So for anybody who might want to start introducing the bottle, like, you know, expressing and then introducing the bottle, what's the earliest you should really try and do that?
So you hear a lot of the time people say, don't do that pre 6 weeks. And there's a bit of yes and no to that. So when our baby is first born, our body doesn't know, are we producing enough milk for 1 baby or 5 babies? And if we start expressing really early, our body will go, wow, let's go absolutely wild. And you've got the potential to produce huge amounts of milk, which for a lot of people you think, brilliant, that's what I want. All my friends have stopped breastfeeding because they didn't have enough milk. When usually that's not actually the case. It's because they haven't had any skilled help to work out what's going on. But having too much milk causes loads of issues with you and your baby. So what I would say is you want to have a milk supply that's established and enough for your baby. I would also say that you really want your baby's latch to be good. You know that your baby can go to the breast and you've learnt your dance together and you feel confident in the latch, because as we introduce a bottle is a much easier way to receive milk, and a baby can sit very shallowly on the teat of a bottle and basically just lie back and chill, and then they start to expect the same from the breast. So we really want to be doing a paced bottle feeding technique, which I've got a video on my account about, and that if you are going to express, you've got your latch nailed, your milk supply is good, and that you're only expressing what your baby is going to drink. So unless you're returning to work or knowing you're going to be away from your baby, absolutely do not try building a freezer stash early on, because your body will go bananas. So really 4 to 6 weeks, if you can wait, I would, and then only really expressing what your baby needs.
I think that's really, really helpful advice. Because I think as well, you can feel a little bit, I don't know about anybody else, but I think I waited 3 months and then I felt a little bit like I trapped myself and I'd not got him onto the bottle, and then I was panicking about that. Maybe if I'd done it a bit sooner, I wouldn't have felt like that. Like I could have gone out a little bit more at first, but yeah, it's just knowing, isn't it, when the right time is for you and feeling comfortable.
That's exactly it. For some people, they want to go to an exercise class or go and see friends very early on. And then other people feel, I really don't want to be apart from my baby and I can't be asked to pump. And there is no right or wrong. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, I find, with parenting. Just really tune into your instinct. What do you need from your baby and what does your baby need from you? It's okay for us to say, I need to stay at home with my baby. I can't leave them. It's okay. Yeah. It's really, really hard, but you're right. It's doing what feels right for you.
Well, I feel like we've not even touched the surface. We've been talking for 25 minutes. I know that there are so many other things that people want to ask and, you know, read about, etc. Where can women go that want to find out a lot more about breastfeeding, the kinds of videos that you've just mentioned? I know that you've got your account, Olivia, so everybody please give Olivia a follow and have a look at all of her amazing reels.
I think it's really... Oh, sorry. On social media, there's loads of parenting experts, and they have blue ticks, and they have some of them have millions of followers. but actually what's their speciality? What are their qualifications? If you're looking for infant feeding, I personally wouldn't take advice from anybody unless they're a specialist. So I'd be looking at, do they actually have a qualification in this? It doesn't have to be, I'm an IBCLC, and that's International Board Certified Lactation Consultant. So sort of the top tier of your lactation infant feeding stuff. You've got breastfeeding counsellors, amazing, peer supporters or specialist midwives or specialist health visitors with infant feeding specialisms. Do be critical of who you're taking advice from and look at what their qualifications are, because if they've got them, they'll publicly state them. So don't get wrapped up in number of followers or celebrities. So a lot of big celebs or influencers, they've had children and they are brilliant. They share their experiences, which I know can make people feel less alone. But you also think, she's doing this, oh, that means I should do that. And actually it's not always the safest or the best thing to be doing for your baby just because they're doing it. So do be critical of who you're following and taking advice from.
So thank you so much, Olivia, for taking time out of your holiday.
You're welcome.
It's amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Okay. Enjoy the rest of your time. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.